Hello, everyone. Hi. How are you? It's so nice to see you all. Again, we did one of these last week. This is really fun. Welcome to tonight's Vicki and Carl Zeiger Insight Seminar at the Old Globe. I'm Justin Waldman, he, him, Associate Artistic Director at the Old Globe. And we are so excited to be able to welcome the amazing director of Midsummer Night's Dream, Patricia McGregor, to be our guest tonight.
Thank you.
We are just so blessed to have Patricia with us. She is amazing, as you will find out. And I am going to do my customary embarrassment of our guest and talk a little about the amazing accomplishments in her career and life. And then we'll start some questions, okay? So for Patricia McGregor at the Globe, she is a resident artist here at the Old Globe, and she's directed 5 shows for the Globe. I think this is your 6th. What You Are, 3 of our Globe for All tours, Shakespeare Call and Response, A Midsummer Night's Dream, and Measure for Measure, and the digital production of Krapp's Last Tape that we did during the pandemic with Ron Cephas Jones, which if you missed it, I'm really sorry. It was amazing. Her national directing credits include the 24-hour plays on Broadway, Lights Out, the Nat King Cole musical up at the Geffen Playhouse in LA, and productions pretty much in all the amazing places across the country that we're all used to now, the Atlantic Center Theater Group, Public Theater, BAM, the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis, the Roundabout, Cal Shakespeare, and Signature Theater, basically all the really, really good ones. And she has an amazing gig as a tour consultant. She works with some amazing recording artists like J. Cole and Raphael Sadiq, and she is the coordinator for the Arts in the Armed Forces touring thing, which is amazing. You should look at that. It's an amazing charity. And she also just directed her first feature movie, whose name I'm forgetting.
1660 Vine.
1660 Vine. So she came here directly from that. And when I mean directly, I mean directly. She drove from the set to first rehearsal. She has an MFA from Yale School of Drama. And I am burying the lead here because we are so blessed. And the American theater is in such great shape here because Patricia has just been named the artistic director of New York Theater Workshop in New York City. So when she opens this show, she immediately starts another job. So no rest for the wicked, I guess. She is genuinely one of the most forward-thinking humans in the American theater, and with a generosity and spirit and warmth that is unconditional and amazing. We are just blessed to have had her in our lives and is in San Diego for so long, and we're going to miss you. I'm not going to cry already. But everybody, Patricia McGregor, director of Midsummer Night's Dream.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you.
Thank you, my dear. Okay, I just want to start off because this is the first one I've got to do with you. So I love asking people, how did you get into this business that we call show?
Well, there are 2 answers. The first one is I was born in St. Croix in the Virgin Islands, and we grew up, my mother was a public school art teacher, and my older sister danced at Caribbean Dance Company, and my mom did the costumes, and she sewed the sequins, and she did all of that. And I tried to do the ballet that she was doing, and I was always one step off, but when I realized when I was one step off, people laughed. And so that's where I decided a little drama, maybe that's where I'm supposed to be, a little comedy, a little drama, a little show and dance. So I grew up in the Virgin Islands that had a lot of rich storytelling and actually a lot of outdoor theater. So when I go to outdoor spaces, it makes me feel at home in many ways because that kind of outdoor invitation was very prevalent. And then I moved around a lot, Hawaii, California, Illinois, Florida. Luckily, I went to a performing arts high school in Florida, but before that was a middle school that had a theater class. And I was a big sports kid, and I got asthma, and I couldn't compete the same way that I was used to competing. And very luckily, in this 8th grade middle school, we read Midsummer Night's Dream. And I had seen a production the year before at another school, and something woke up in me, and I just thought, there was something about the delight and the alchemy of the language, and then being in that class and I played Puck. And all of a sudden, I said, oh, there's no turning back. There was something about the muscularity of the language that appealed to the athlete in me. There was something about both the poetry and politics that appealed to the activist in me. And there was something about the sense of community when you build a play that, appealed to, like, I was a big church-going kid, and it kind of felt like church in that way. We all gather and we kind of, we gather to celebrate and to question and to ask the big questions that life is seeking answers to. And so that's how I got in. And once I was in, I was in for life, and here we are.
And how did directing become your milieu? How did that become your passion in life?
Yeah, I went to SMU in Dallas, and I went originally as an actress. I had been in middle school and high school. At that time in Orlando, Florida, Disney and Universal and all of those things were there. My roommate was a Mouseketeer. I mean, I lived in a very strange cross sections of pop culture where it felt like being a performer was really a very viable option from our experience. So I went to SMU. I was going to be an actor, and there were some really deep and troubling racial divides on the campus. And particularly, we had a group of black and white South African runners who were there, and there was a lot of conflict going on. And at the time, I read the play, My Children, My Africa, Athol Fugard's My Children, My Africa. And I said, well, there's not a part in it for me, but I think it has a part to play on this campus. And so luckily, this great director, Amelia Ben-Susan, was the head of our program at the time, and she just gave me a couple of tips, and out of the passion and the desire to tell this story in this community at this moment, that's where my first directing came from. And I sat back in the audience. I can still see B450, I think was the name of the theater, and I sat back, and I never thought I would love anything the way I loved acting. I never thought anything would light my fire. And watching the event of the audience watch this thing that we had created, and then curating some of the conversations, and really, I think in many ways, creating some really important conversations and potential healing. At that time, Desmond Tutu came to be a guest speaker on this President's Lecture series that I got to be a part of, and I got to ask him a question. I said, what does America have to learn from the Truth and Reconciliation trials? And he said, we still have so many stories that we try to tuck away, but if we put them in the center of the room and we all deal with them together, that's the way we're going to be able to move forward. And so the combination of all of those things, plus I realized I like to be in control of things. And so the realization that I often say, like, I work like a funnel. So in the beginning, everything is possible. And I like to say yes, and I like to, provoke a space where we get to say yes. And by the end, the precision of being able to say, we were just working, and we'll be working all the way until opening. The difference between when a sound and a light cue happens in 1.3 seconds with a big boom at the end, or 0.9 seconds with a soft boom at the end. It is such a strange alchemy. It is such a privilege to be able to work with fabulous actors and designers, and in this world that feels so chaotic, to refine a thing to a point that it hopefully creates meaning while also leaving the liveness of it open. Having just done my first film, which I love the precision of film editing, but what you miss is that magic that's going to happen when an audience member has a reaction, and then all of a sudden, the actor can't help but to take that in. And so I think that craft of being able to create the container that is both precise enough to yield meaning and yet free enough to be able to breathe with a live audience, that's as close to magic as I know. And so I don't really know how to put a rabbit out of the hat, but I know that's my love space.
That's amazing. That's so great. And I never knew that Amelia Ben-Susan was your professor, because also Amelia Ben-Susan runs the Hartford Stage Company in Hartford, Connecticut. So two artistic directors of major theaters working at SMU at the same time.
We were literally
incredible.
Same 4 years. I was a freshman when she came in, and she was also a mother, and as a working mom, she was really an important figure for me to see, because I came in and she had a young child that she was taking care of and still, running a room in a brilliant way, and it helped for me to see that it is possible, that all of these things are possible and I didn't have to choose one or the other. So Amelia's been a great friend and mentor.
That's incredible. I love those connections. It's always fun to figure those out in those ways.
Yeah.
You talked about Fugard, you worked on Breck with us. You have a vast history with Shakespeare, both at the Globe, elsewhere, teaching it, directing it at other universities. What do you see in his work that make you get so excited that you want to keep working on them?
I feel like there are, everyone talks about, and I think it's very true, there are big themes, big ideas that still feel very relevant. I feel like he takes often things that are very political or very mysterious and puts them in a cast of characters that you either feel very close to or you want to know more about or you feel repelled from, but you still want to find out what made them tick. I think Shakespeare's question of what makes people tick and what makes people act and how and why feels really important to me. I also love that it's so, I trust it. I'm kind of secretly a very nerdy Shakespeare person. I'm really following, did they get the antithesis? Did they, all of these real kind of inside baseball thing. But at the end of the day, I also feel like it's incredibly durable. It allows for each artist, each director, each audience to have its own relationship with the play. So while I'm about half of my career, maybe 60% of my career is usually new American plays, and there's something about serving that playwright and serving that new voice and really wanting to make sure that their original intention and vision, they've handed me their baby, and I want to take care of that baby to the most precise way that I can. And with Shakespeare, it's durable. The baby is grown. The baby is hundreds of years old. The baby has learned many, many lessons, and the baby can take a little something on the chin in a funny kind of way. So I feel like there's a durability, and just the language. I mean, there are phrases, there are character journeys that I hold with me, that still teach me things. When I'm in more and more positions of leadership, and as you are, there's kind of a way in which eyes are on you in a certain kind of way. And if I ever have a moment where I say, well, what are they doing in the corner? I think of Leontes. Mm-hmm. And I think of the way in which I feel like his position led to paranoia and his sense of whisperings. He thought everyone was whispering. And I said, Leontes, go to sleep. My own inner Leontes, go to sleep. Or if I need to call upon grace, Winter's Tale is one of my favorites, so I'll go into that. If I need to call upon grace, Hermione comes to me. And in a moment where the world could fall apart but for her grace, or for Paulina's straight talk. These characters live with me. They have become my friends, and they help to teach me about things. They help to soothe me when I feel enraged, and they help to warn me about what not to do. So if they've done that for me, I hope they'll continue to do that for other people.
That's amazing. I love that. I love looking at those experiences and putting them into your own life. It's so amazing. And all from one play.
From one play, yeah.
But, okay, so Midsummer, right? It is the one, though. It is your way into it all. And it is the one that we all think about. Outdoor Shakespeare, it's Midsummer. It is Midsummer right now. So how many have you done? You've done 4?
I think this is my third directing. And I've performed in one, and then I've had excerpts from one in this call and response thing. So I've played with it several times, and I try to make sure that I bring some of the things that we learned and discovered, but I try to be responsive to the collaborators that I'm with, and to make each production its own.
And why do you keep coming back to it?
I love it. I think it has everything. I think it is. How there's some meals that you might only have once a year, but you say that had everything that I wanted. And so to me, it has magic, which I think in this world that feels so heavy, magic is important, and it has magic. It has transformation at the center, the possibility, and you'll see in our production there's a couple of transformations that we've made our own production imprint on, but the idea of can we transform, how, why, I think that's at the center. I think that it's a love letter to theater. The mechanicals, I love the mechanicals. We all take ourselves so seriously sometimes, and the mechanicals come in with what I call waka waka. One of my favorite teachers was this guy, Chris Bays. He was a clown teacher, and I always think we all have our inner clown. And our inner clown looks from the outside to just be foolish, but often is incredibly helpful. And the reason they get foolish is because they're trying so hard to make the world become what they want it to be. And so it has their inner clown. But it also, at the center of it, I think this is the thing, at least, people forget, and I think is really important for me, there's actually big meat and potato stakes. Aegeus comes in at the center of this and says, if my daughter doesn't bend to my will, she will die. Spoiler alert, but it happens in the first scene, so, And I'm interested in the agency of a young woman who, faced with the consequences of death, chooses love, chooses agency, chooses her own path. And I think that in the times that we're in, which are similar and different than the times we've always been in, people, and as a woman, my framework of thinking of my own journey and places where there were Aegeuses in my life, trying to stop me from following the path that was true for me and what was my journey. So I think it has everything. It has, it has magic, it has clown, it has politics, it has spectacle, it has all of that. But at the center is a really important story about a lot of transformation, but about one particular young woman and young couple's journey to define love for themselves and hold on to that. And through that, they help to change the world.
That's amazing. I mean, it is. It's all things, and and you get to have so many people in it that are so fun. Having done it a couple times, I wonder, can you articulate what your vision for this production was? Like, what was specific about this that you wanted to explore, in what visual style? Because it is a feast for the eyes in there, and so much like where the fairy world is set, where the world is set. Takes us and centers us and tells us a lot about what we're talking about. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I built this one particularly for the Globe, knowing this exact stage, and for San Diego. I always try to be, universal and hyper local. So I was walking around one day and I saw this Comic-Con thing, and I was trying to think of Theseus and Hippolyta and what does it mean to be a ruler, and and there's some of the language that's a little bit problematic, like I won thee with my spear, but what does that really mean? And I thought, to me, that lives in the Marvel universe. Like, I can make Hippolyta, which you'll see, a superhero as well. The question of Theseus tends to have a lot of the language. I've moved some of that to Hippolyta, but I'm really, it's durable, remember. I was really interested. So there's like this Marvel, not particularly Marvel, but like superhero multiverse, which I think allows then all of the other universes to live within that, which is kind of how those movies work. So you've got that big framework, and as you go in, you'll see this neoclassical, rectilineal, like very capital P palace look that feels like it's right for opera, and still beautiful, because David Reynoso does not make anything that is not beautiful. And then when we end up going in, and we meet the lovers there, and I often think of the lovers as like something from the WB, or CW, or one of those places, because while the stakes are absolutely life and death, they're also so passionate. They're young, and they're determined, and they're headstrong, and everything's a little bit heightened. So they kind of live in that world. And then we go into the woods, and the woods are a place of mystery and magic. So when I talk to David about what our woods want to be, I thought to myself, well, what if Maxfield Parrish, the beautiful, painter, met with like an Afro-punk concert in Burning Man featuring David Bowie. So there's, it's a very particular and peculiar world that I hope when you see it, you'll feel the insights. Definitely you'll see the Maxfield Parrish, for those of you who know. I feel like the way in which he plays with light and magic feel very alive. And then also that there's something edgy, that there's, I always love Alexander McQueen, who does both very historical and very edgy things, so all of those are at play. And then when we get to the mechanicals, I call the mechanicals Waka Waka. They are
What was the name of their troupe?
Oh, the Weekanicals. So we were working on a prop, and we were trying to we were fitting some mechanicals language, and then we kind of spitballed around to figure out what it was. And I often say when I work on Midsummer, we are all mechanicals. I make that, I think it's true of all of us, but I think it's true particularly people working on the show. So we were trying to talk about what was a short way to get to, the idea that we are all mechanicals, and somebody came up with we-canicals. So you'll see on one of the props that the name of this particular troupe is the we-canicals, and they're fun, and they're silly, and they're not afraid to be bold. I think often in life, we as an adult, I have 2 kids, I take care of my parents. There's a lot of very grown things that I deal with, and so as I grow, I find myself living within these choices that are arranged between like 4 and 6 to keep life safer, right? And the mechanicals are not that. The mechanicals are going for it in all extremes, and they are, and they're not trying to be a performance style is a changeable thing. And I think, we are in many ways, very influenced by, in this country, in this moment, influenced by Stanislavski and psychological realism. And I think the mechanicals, who are full of malapropisms and just like, they don't have the burden of everything has to be perfect. Bottom thinks he is more perfect than anyone on the earth, but they're also, I don't know, I just think there's a freedom within the mechanicals, and there's a fun in the broadness of them, and the desire to just say, I often think, don't let the perfect get in the way of the good, and I feel like that's where the mechanicals live. They're not going to be perfect. Quince wants them to be perfect. They're not going to be, but they're not going to let that get in the way of the good, and they bring so much joy in the attempt, which I feel like we can all resonate with.
It's so great. I love that you talk about the mechanicals, because I think they're joyous, as you say, but also like the easiest way in for a lot of people, because we've all been, I think, at some point in the school play and like had the thing where, oh no, it's fallen over. Oh, we got to go get it. So you have an amazing ability through all your work in Shakespeare to make it accessible to modern audiences, and because you talk about all these things that we all relate to that are part of our pop culture lexicon. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about the way that you approach the work to sit in conversation with a modern audience in a way that is really immediate and really present and really alive.
Thank you for that. I feel like the best compliment I can get for the Shakespeare that I do is that it felt clear. When people say that, I think there's a big burden of, and I think Shakespeare is often taught out of a book, not in front of you, which is what it was meant, how it was meant to be, spoken and received. Actually, the sounds that he is making are very intentional, and even if you didn't know the word, that sibilant S is working on your psyche. Mm-hmm. That plosive P is pushing you away. And so when we just read it in the book and not aloud, and not with some of the tools, and I often do this thing called tools, not rules, where I'm not precious about it. I feel really lucky. From a pretty early age, I got to work with Patsy Rodenberg and David Willis and like some of the most incredible people from the National, and Deborah Warner and Fiona Shaw. And I think in many ways it gave me tools, but it also freed me, because I thought to myself, and my mom was British, I just always liked Shakespeare. So I feel very inspired, but not precious. And I feel like I kind of went into the secret gourmet closet where they said, this is where we hide the good stuff, and the good stuff is a kind of understanding of how this works. And that allows me to take that truffle oil and take all of that and do what I want with it, do what we want with it. And I actually feel like that is truer to Shakespeare than trying to hold on to exactly what he was doing in his time, because he was an innovator. He was often taking stories and mythology and pulling from the docks. And I always say he was next to bear baiting. Like, he was next to like Vegas spectacle. So he had to put spectacle in there. He was always trying to move, and his company. And so I think innovation is fundamental to the DNA of Shakespeare. So I feel, and my poor actors will also attest to that, I have these little white notes that I give out where I'm like, people would understand more if you hit that final line ending. So do what you want, but also hit that final line ending, So I know about myself, there's a little bit of a paradox, but I give those notes because I think it's for clarity. And often when we talk about them, there's an aha moment where we clarify. And if we have that, then the audience is going to have it. If we are crystal clear, I do an exercise often where I have them say, in other words, where say pick any line of Shakespeare, and you'll say it as it is, and then you say in other words, and you'll paraphrase it for yourself. And something happens to that actor's body and voice and understanding, and then they'll say, and now on the line, and they'll give their interpretation, but now it's totally personal, it's totally unique, and it's exponentially more clear. And so I don't know if that answered your question, but I think, and I also, the best testing ground for me, I think, are these tours. I've done these 3 tours here, 2 at the Public Theater, these tours that go to some places where people have seen a bunch of Shakespeare, a lot of places where people have never seen Shakespeare, places where people can walk out if they don't want to. The tickets are free, well, other than in places where people are incarcerated and they cannot walk out. But those audiences, they receive it. They are the best audiences for me to figure out, are we doing the right thing? Because when we're clear, there is such an immediate response. And it's not the kind of response that I, as a theater goer for a long period of time, I respond, but it's within that 4 to 6. And I feel like a lot of people, when we go to libraries and women's shelters and all kinds of places, they're responding within a range of 1 to 10, but only if we do it right. And if we do it right, they will feed us by telling Veterans Village, one of my favorite audiences. And when we talk about the big theme, speaking of arts in the armed forces, so I was the artist in residence for Adam Driver's Arts in the Armed Forces, and we go to a lot of different places, bases and West Point and all kinds of places. And when you talk about big themes for audiences like veterans, when you talk about betrayal and war and peace and power and big decisions, the lived experience of those audiences is so deep. And if you hit that bell right, they are going to gong it right back at you. And so while I feel incredibly privileged to be able to do this lush, delicious, it is a love letter, hopefully to all of you, and definitely between David Reynoso and I, and the incredible shops. When you see this work, we are a group of artists, but we have shops that support the vision. It's like one thing to draw something on paper or say some words, but we have dozens upon dozens of artists and artisans and incredible human beings creating this work. And I feel I'm very well aware of the privilege of having that army of people support this vision. And also I'm so glad that I had the training ground of doing it, in a set that had to fit in a van with, a much more limited budget, in a very particular setup. To me, that was the training ground for everything. And so, anyhow, I do it I'm sure I do it selfishly. I know it feeds me, so it's selfish in a certain way, and I try to create a good space for it. But I'm really aware of audiences and the way in which Shakespeare hit. When people leave Shakespeare and feel like they haven't understood it or haven't connected with it, it becomes this burden that sits over them that makes people feel like, well, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I didn't understand Shakespeare. So part of my politics of trying to make it relevant, and sometimes putting in pop music, and sometimes putting in something, not to say that I won't do it with corsets and all of that at some point, but I want people to leave having experienced the story and having felt empowered by the fact that they too now hopefully feel like Shakespeare is mine. And for whatever that does for them, I hope it is all for the good.
That's fantastic. And I love that democracy of it. Like, it democratizes it in such a way where it's like everybody can find their own way in. And you have, especially with this production, but also Call and Response, where it was so much of an actual dialogue in the moment. It was really, it's really special to watch that 400-year-old text just come alive in a park with people talking back to you. It's just really special.
Thank you.
I want to pivot now a little bit to your next adventure, which is so exciting.
Thank you.
Can you contextualize New York Theater Workshop for everybody here that doesn't know? Can you tell us a little bit of the history of the theater company?
So the theater company was founded by Stephen Graham, who, fun fact, is the son of the Washington Post, like the Graham family of the Washington Post. And I think for him, he was really interested in how storytelling and creating a laboratory where visionary storytellers can come and develop work and present work and for that work to be a vital part of the conversation of our democracy. And so there's been a range of work over Jim Nicola, who was my predecessor, who was there for 38 years, either 37 or 38 years, who's incredible, was a great mentor, and has been a great champion of artists, a broad range of artists, and really created this incredible home and this fertile laboratory. I love that workshop is central to the name, because while it's known for certain pieces like Rent, Rent was developed there, and, that helped to buoy the place for a long period of time. And there are a lot of other big musicals that go to Broadway that were developed there. But it's really got an East Village edgy ethos where the sense of that it's got to feel relevant, it's got to feel vital, and even if it means pouring a lot of resources into something, because there's something about that unique artist voice, and they might not even find, there's a huge sense of risk at the place, and it's really one of my Freedom, my husband, as you all know, will go to work at the Public, which is the cousin down the corner, you may have heard of it, and I think about the way in which the Public and New York Theater Workshop, budget-wise, New York Theater Workshop is a smaller operation, but pound for pound, it's a real heavy hitter. And the support it's given both nationally and internationally for people like Carol Churchill or Ivo van Hove, or, there's an international element, but then there's also a really local element that has supported. They have a program called The Usual Suspects, and I, maybe about a decade ago, became a usual suspect. And that cohort of people feel like we're a community that hold each other up, because it can be hard. I feel very lucky. This moment for me is incredible. But there are a lot of times where you might feel you might want to leave, and the workshop is one of those places that says your voice doesn't have to be like everyone else's in order to stay, and gives resources, and I think that's what I would call it. If my dad watched a lot of boxing, and it's like a really it's a really potent, it's not a heavyweight in terms of budget, but it's a heavyweight in terms of impact. And I couldn't think of a theater that I would feel more honored or hopefully better suited to lead. It's got a range of like me. I go from big Broadway style musicals to modern Shakespeare to new plays to hybrid. They did a piece about Miriam Makeba recently that was more like a concert mashup, and the experimentation of form is important. And I love scientists, and I feel like you don't have innovation if you don't have experimentation, and I feel like it is the best laboratory for that, while also producing incredible plays. And so and they have an incredible crew of people with them, from their board to their staff to the artists that we uphold. So having been held up by places like the Workshop, I'm really excited to provide that kind of support to other artists.
It's amazing, and it's like it couldn't have been a more perfect hire for a more perfect place. We're the American theater is the better for all of this. We're just so excited from afar.
Thank you.
I want to open it up to everybody's questions here for Patricia before we run out of time. I'm sorry, we were talking so much that I don't want to run out of time for y'all. Would anybody like to ask? Yes, sir.
Did you address the issue that many of us come to see Midsummer with fear and trembling because we had to read it in high school and have seen it 10 times since? And I almost thought I preferred being tortured.
Then you are who I'm trying to convert. In the transformation, I do think a lot about how people have an imprint of it. And often it was a torturous. It's kind of like Romeo and Juliet in Midsummer, or maybe people would throw in Hamlet, but like really those were the two. And often it was kind of in poorly, fluorescent lit classrooms with kids who are falling asleep, and like, who really cares? Who cares, right? So hopefully from Jump, I'd love to try and find you afterwards, but from Jump, we try to say, well, this is a Midsummer like no other. And I do think both the visual feast, the trim cutting, because there are some things, there's some references that I go, yeah, I studied that in a book a while ago. Can we make it intelligible? At the end of the day, I want theater to make people feel more alive. when they leave. And sometimes feeling alive means you feel mad. You think about some things. This is not one of those. I don't think we're going for that in this one. But it doesn't, I think those high school experiences often feel boring and tedious and inaccessible. And my goal in this is to do the opposite of boring and tedious and inaccessible. And whether I achieve that or not is for you all to tell me. George C. Wolfe often says, I never believe a person, but I always believe the audience. So what I like to do is sit back and watch the event and watch the audience and figure out how to make those two meet in the most precise way. That's my work. That's why previews are so exciting. That's why you all being here are so exciting, because I won't know until I watch you watch it. And then I'll tinker like a mechanical as long as I can, and then I'll let it go. But that is at least the attempt. That is the attempt.
Yes, ma'am. What? Sorry, I'll just repeat so everybody can hear. Sorry. That her grandchildren are here. So anything special to know if you're 10 and 11 years old?
I would say, I've built it hopefully knowing that kids are going to be here as well. Like my kids will be here. And there are parts that I think will be really for them. Like, I think that a little bit of this, there's some Marvel World stuff in there that I think is for all ages, but I think hopefully we'll win some people over to the event in that morning. I'll also say, the fairies are provocative sometimes. We try to have the world of provocation within textual support, and I think that's also, like, they're so curious. What does that mean? We had some kids in the audience on Sunday, and when Bottom came out, well, again, no spoilers. Anyhow, we'll just, I'm pretty sure most people know, I don't want to spoil it. When some moments happen, what I loved was hearing the laughter. I wished I was sitting right next to them so I could see where they were laughing, where they were confused, where they might want to fall asleep. So I would just be curious to talk to them at the end of it. I think if there was any framing, maybe the idea that these characters live in 4 different worlds. There's royals, there's lovers, there's fairies, and there's mechanicals. And how do those worlds operate in different ways, and what happens when those worlds collide? I don't know. That's maybe something. There you go. She said to say that. But I hope they experience something that doesn't feel like their high school, a high school reading. Yes. Yes, that's the hope. That's it. Hopefully it will feel more alive to them than, yeah.
We had a question over here, yes?
Yeah.
I like what you're saying about innovation, accessibility. I found out about this is one of my homies is in the set.
Yes. Mickey, DJ Mickey.
So what's your process talking about, like, how it's important that it's community and also diversity in theater?
The question is about accessibility and diversity in the production. Like, how do you bring more people on stage to bring more people off stage?
Absolutely. Okay. I mean, I think it's to me there is such a great opportunity. I think often people think of progress as a burden instead of an opportunity, and 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 to me there is such a richness in the opportunity of welcoming. Let's say we just start with the San Diego community, which Mickey, this is my 4th play I've worked on with Mickey. I said I worked with Mickey on the first one. I said, oh no, we're going to keep going and keep going and keep going. And so part of that is about wanting to make sure to see the world that I see around me and that I want to see in theaters. And the way that we do that is to invite a really racially, economically, for example, one of the actors here, which I was really excited about, Lysander. You always have to answer in the play to me, why is Aegeus so mad at Lysander? Lysander says, I'm as wealthy as Demetrius. Like, why is Aegeus so mad? And so we have a non-binary actor, and when I spoke to them about what they were interested in, who's fabulous, and they said, I'm really interested in playing this as a genderqueer woman, and what does that mean? And how does that awaken the conversation? And we're absolutely, like, we're sticking with the text, we're sticking with all of those kinds of things, but having that representation, all of a sudden, it brings new meaning, it brings something else to what might be going on with Aegeus. And I think working with, there are a lot of Victor, who plays Aegeus, is a local actor. We've worked with a lot of local actors, some from the Black Artists Collective, who Freedom and I helped to start a few years ago. And to me, it's just richness, it's abundance, and it's hopefully creating the world. If we see that world on stage, it's racially very diverse. It's got age diversity. It's got sexual orientation. It's got, diversity. It's just got diversity in as many ways as I could within the casting that I had. So, okay, how full can we be? How rich can we be? And it's not about checking off boxes. It's about invitation to a richness, to an abundance. And that's what I think we were able to create here. And we do have a certain percentage of the company that are students here. So also trying to find within the students, sometimes students get cast as just as, spear carriers, and there is honor in carrying a spear. But I said, I'm interested in those actors having opportunities to step into things as well. So for me, that's just, it's love, it's abundance, it's an opportunity to show the world, I think, as it is and as it should be. So that's my goal.
Is also your intentionality of staffing the show off stage as well as on.
Yeah, I there's a lot of, I hope that there's been a fair amount of progress in the last few years about designers as well, and like who are the people who you surround yourself with. And I, for years, really wanted people whose lived experience and excellence of artistry brings richness to the perspectives and the world that we see. So now there are calls, and I might have been part of the provocation for some of these calls, but there's calls to really look at, not just fall into the habit of who we know and who's gone to schools like mine, going to Yale. I'm like, I know I have a certain privilege. I could just call that little cohort of friends, but how do we really examine who's going to be in the room and whose artistry and the artistry of their lived experience is going to help tell this story in a more profound way. So that's been something that's always been really important to me, and hopefully we've achieved that in a great way here.
Excellent. Yeah. I think we have time for one more. Yes, ma'am.
What are you looking forward to?
Oh,
What are you
great
looking
question. What am I
forward
looking
to?
forward to? Oh man, I'm looking forward to watching most immediately. I'll kind of give three. Most immediately, I'm looking forward to watching the audience watch the piece and learning what I need to learn to make it the best that we can make it. I'm looking forward to, we're road tripping across. We gave our kids we're trying to, instill agency in so I was like, we're going to fly. And my son wants to go through New Mexico. So we are going to road trip. I look forward to like a memorable time to be able to focus just on us as a family. My life right now is moving in a lot of different ways, and I think it will actually be a really special, magical, hopefully memorable time. I know it'll be exhausting at times, but I'm looking forward to that. And then I'm looking forward to, at the workshop, upholding the amazing community of artists that are there, but to be a door opener or a window opener or a support pedestal for someone who may not have gotten it some other way and whose voice is vital to the conversation. And I'm just really excited about providing resources and seeing both productions that are visceral and exciting and important parts of the dialogue, and also to hopefully create a home for somebody, an artistic home for somebody, or crews of people who may not have gotten it any other way. I think a lot about Lloyd Richards and August Wilson, and how August Wilson, who was incredible and working in his own ways and in beautiful ways in Minneapolis, but Lloyd Richards, who was at Yale and was at the O'Neill, saw something in him and created the space so he could become who he became. And I think as an artistic leader, I'm really interested in who needs the support. Not only the glamorous side, I'm interested in, we have a play, Merrily We Roll Along with Daniel Radcliffe, and, it's a big. It's a little fighter, but it's got some very big names attached to it. But I'm interested in beyond the Daniel Radcliffes of the world. How can we support the next Daniel Radcliffe, or how can we support the next August Wilson, or how can we support the next artist whose voice needs to be heard? So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Well, I am looking forward to watching you from afar, doing it at an amazing place and doing it with such artistry and love and warmth and just an all-encompassing hug for the idea of what theater can be.
Thank
It's
you.
just like every day with you is like that. So I'm very jealous of this company that gets to have a lot more of you while we let you go, and we will miss you, but be rooting from here. Everybody, I want to thank Patricia McGregor for her time and her artistry
Thank
here.
you all. Thank you.